Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is easily one of the most fiery, vitriolic debates in the history of global sports. We're going to uncover the real historical reason why Americans, and actually a lot of the rest of the world, use completely different names for the beautiful game. So, is it football? Is it soccer? Let's get right into it. You know the debate, right? Whether it's online or down at the pub, purists of the game love to blame Americans. The running theory is that the US invented a totally new word just to be difficult, or maybe out of pure stubbornness. They point the finger straight across the Atlantic and ask, who ruined the word?
Well, prepare for a massive plot twist. The word soccer is absolutely 100% a British invention. No way around it. It wasn't some American corruption at all. It was actually coined right in late 19th century England. And historians point specifically to upper middle class students at elite universities.
Section 1, 1863, Codifying the Rules. To really wrap our heads around this giant linguistic misunderstanding, we have to travel back to London in the mid-19th century. Imagine a time when totally chaotic, unorganized versions of ball games were being played all over British public schools. It was a mess. On one side, you had schools playing rugby rules, which literally meant you could run with the ball in your hands. But then, on the flip side, you had rules from places like Sheffield and Cambridge that strictly restricted players to only using their feet, well, except for a goalie. Basically, schools were fundamentally divided on what this game even was. The absolute game changer happened in December 1863. That's when Ebenezer Morley drafted 13 unified laws for the newly formed Football Association. This was a massive turning point, guys. These laws came down hard. They strictly outlawed carrying the ball, and they completely banned hacking, which, if you didn't know, was the incredibly painful practice of just kicking your opponents in the shins. So, boom! A single unified set of rules for the kicking game was finally born. This codification officially split the sport into the two distinct codes we still know today. You've got rugby football for the handlers and association football for the kickers. And right there, that split is the absolute foundation of the whole terminology debate we're unpacking today. Section 2, the Oxford slang. Okay, so as both of these sports exploded in popularity, students in the 1870s and 1880s, especially the ones at Oxford University, developed this very specific kind of quirky linguistic habit. They love to playfully shorten words and slap an suffix on the end. It's simple linguistic math. They turned breakfast into brekker, rugby into rugger, and yep, they did the exact same thing to association football. Step 1, take association. Step 2, grab the assoc part. Step 3, add the suffix. And there you have it, soccer. It was literally just chummy, elite university slang. And we actually have the paper trail to prove it. The absolute earliest known printed use of the word comes from an anonymous pupil in the November 1885 edition of the Marlboroughian, which was a magazine for Marlborough College. This kid wrote in to complain about a lack of association games and literally signed his letter with the pseudonym Soccer. He totally expected all of his peers to know exactly what that meant. By late 1885, the term mysteriously popped up in multiple school magazines all at once. It was in the Marlboroughian down in Wiltshire, the Rayleian in Oxfordshire, where, fun fact, they actually spelled it with a K, soccer, and the Old Hollian up in Shropshire. Spreading like wildfire across geographically diverse areas practically overnight meant the word was officially out in the wild. It was firmly cemented in the British vocabulary. Section 3, the American gridiron collusion. Now, let's look across the Atlantic. Why did this elite British slang become the permanent, everyday name for the sport in North America? Well, by the time the British Association football game crossed the ocean to the US, they ran into a major logistical headache. Americans had already developed their own incredibly popular rugby-based gridiron game, and crucially, they had already claimed the name American football for it. The linguistic real estate was completely taken. So what do? Americans adopted the British slang word soccer out of pure necessity to tell the two sports apart. They embraced it so officially that their national governing body was actually named the United States Soccer Football Association for decades, right up until 1974. It had absolutely nothing to do with Americans trying to be edgy or different. It was literally just about being clear. Section 4, why Britain dropped soccer. This brings up a really fascinating question. If the British invented the word and the Americans just borrowed it because they had to, why is soccer treated like such a dirty, taboo word in the UK today? Well, University of Michigan professor Stefan Szymanski mapped this out perfectly. In the first half of the 20th century, soccer was totally recognized as an informal term in Britain. Believe it or not, its usage in the UK actually peaked between 1960 and 1980, where it was used interchangeably with football. But then, the 1980s hit, and you see this massive, rapid nosedive. What caused the crash? As the sport grew globally, British fans started to view the word soccer as this purely American invention. There was a huge push for formality and a rising wave of anti-Americanism in sports culture at the time. Because of that, British fans aggressively dropped soccer from their vocabularies. They wanted to reclaim that traditional football identity as completely, entirely their own. The irony here is just off the charts. As Professor Szymanski puts it, the rest of us can continue to get mad about it if we want, but it might be more sensible to get over it and recognize that our favorite game can just as easily be called soccer as football. It's wild that British fans frequently berate Americans for using a word that was historically gifted to them by the English themselves. Section 5. The global picture today. If we zoom out and look at a map right now, it's incredibly clear that the United States is definitely not alone in relying on this historic terminology. A ton of former British colonies still actively use the term soccer. We're talking Australia, Ireland, Canada, South Africa, and New Zealand. Why? Because exactly like the US, places like Australia and Ireland already have their own wildly popular domestic sports known locally as football, like Aussie rules or Gaelic football. They kept soccer for the exact same practical reasons. This linguistic split gets even crazier. It actually divides single countries. The Philippines is a fantastic example. Up in the north, they use the term football because of historical Spanish influence. But down in the south, they use soccer, which is just a localized spelling of soccer, thanks to American colonial history. Literally one country, two totally different historical influences on the exact same game. And even in nations without their own domestic versions of football, the soccer terminology still thrives. Take Japan, for example. Post-war American influence successfully embedded the loanword soccer directly into their culture, and that is exactly what they call the sport today. Here's a really fun fact for the purists. Despite all the modern stigma in the UK, the word hasn't been completely erased from British culture. Not at all. It survives in massive media properties. You've got the highly respected World Soccer magazine, Sky Sports' insanely popular Soccer Saturday program, and even top English clubs running youth soccer camps. The word is literally hiding in plain sight in the very country that claims to hate it. So, knowing all this about its British origins, does it really matter if we call it football or soccer? The next time you find yourself dragged into this heated debate, either online or at the pub, just ask yourself, does a silly slang word coined by 19th century British schoolboys really deserve to divide fans of the world's most unifying game? I'll let you decide on that one. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.